The ginger miso soup was cooling in front of me. I watched the oil slick on the surface. Everything felt slick. Oily. Sarah's eyes were darting around the crowded sushi restaurant, avoiding mine. She was rehearsing the lie. She finally leaned in, her voice low, a theatrical performance of distress. "David, about the holiday party." I did not help her. I just waited. I felt nothing but a quiet, surgical detachment. "I really need you not to come this year." She paused, letting the silence twist. "My friends are honestly embarrassed for me when I bring you around." The words were not a shock. They were a confirmation. The final piece of the equation I'd been solving for 2 years. Embarrassed. Because I chose a stable, lucrative career in asset management while she chased ephemeral status in PR. Because I did not spend money on vanity, but on wealth. I looked at the piece of yellowtail nigiri on my plate. Perfectly cut, ready to be consumed. This wasn't about the party. It was about the slow, calculated dismantling of my identity, designed to make me feel small enough to control. The criticism of my clothes, the sighs over my quiet weekends, the constant, insidious comparison to her successful, ambitious male colleagues. Her emotional manipulation had been a persistent hum beneath our life, but her confidence in its effectiveness had recently become absolute. She had grown careless. I started collecting the evidence 6 weeks ago, not of infidelity, but of financial betrayal. I noticed the new, aggressive spending, the designer bag that cost 2 months of my salary, the impromptu trips to NYC. She'd explained it away as bonuses. I didn't believe her. I always look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. I used my skill. I didn't hack. I simply audited her digital footprint with the meticulous focus I applied to high-risk corporate accounts. Her texts showed no lover, just a circle of toxic, status-obsessed colleagues who fueled her contempt for my boring reality. But the finances told the true story. The money wasn't from a bonus. It was coming from a joint savings account, a secret secondary account she had opened a year prior, slowly draining our liquidity. The fund we established for our future, our divorce war chest. But only hers. The sushi arrived. She picked up her chopsticks, relieved the confrontation was over. She assumed my silence meant defeat. "I guess I'll just tell people you're busy," she said, already planning her narrative. I reached for my wallet. I counted out the cash for my half of the meal, laying the bills flat on the check tray. Precision. I made sure it was exact. I didn't leave a tip. I stood up. I didn't look at her, only at the tray. "My half is paid," I stated. I turned and walked out. No grand exit, no slam of the door. The only noise was the dull clatter of plates and the muffled chatter of the restaurant. I left her sitting there, chopsticks halfway to her mouth, confused by the lack of screaming, the lack of begging. I never spoke to her again. Within 48 hours, I initiated the asset freeze on the joint savings, citing her fraudulent transfer of funds. Within 1 week, the divorce papers were served. Papers she couldn't afford to fight, thanks to her own greedy preemptive raid on the accounts. The house, legally, was mine. The assets I had quietly built in my separate, boring accounts, the ones she never bothered to ask about, were untouchable. 3 months later, my company acquired a new hedge fund, a public, high-profile merger. The news was everywhere. I saw her friends first, at a coffee shop I started frequenting. They didn't sneer, they stared. Stared at the man who was now a managing partner. Stared at the quiet competence they had taught Sarah to despise. Their whispers were cold recognition. I was not the loser. I was the one who won. Sarah's spiral was immediate, visible. Her job evaporated. Her social currency, based on superficial wealth, vanished. She called my lawyers hysterical. I never took the call. I finally signed the final separation documents. I didn't look at her signature. The emotional truth was clear. Her contempt was merely a projection of her own emptiness. She wanted to feel superior, so she tried to shrink me. I simply removed myself from her orbit and let her trajectory continue downward. I finished my coffee. No emotion, only clarity. The woman who was embarrassed by my presence was now humiliated by my absence. I walked out, feeling the true power of strategic silence. She wanted me to be small. I chose to be unreachable.